Look at the developer. They tried to pin the disappointment in Lufia Ruins lore. There was one game that stood out to me and said, I gotta review this. Not that it's a good game, but it's a game that I didn't believe existed. The game in question is a game called Quest Brian's Journey. This is a Game Boy Color interpretation of an N64 JRPG game that you may have heard of. Yep, it's Quest 64. We all know the story about that game. The N64 was starting for RPGs, and in general, it didn't have many. It had Tactics Ogre, Paper Mario, and Quest 64. Yeah, people like to consider Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, and Majora's Mask as RPGs, but I consider them more like action-adventure games than RPGs. My point is, I went into this game with no faith whatsoever, because this is not an RPG-style system. Around 1999 to 2000, you had Pokemon, a remake of Crystallis, Dragon Warrior Monsters, along with remakes of the first 3 Dragon Warrior games, which the first one came with number 2, and the third one came by itself. The system wasn't started as hard for new RPGs with backwards compatibility. The system had a ton to go back to. In other words, I didn't see much point of a game like this. So moving on to actual review itself, in the standard format that I always go into. The game was developed by Imagineer, published by Sunsoft and still THQ, and released in 1999. We all know the beloved Sunsoft, how beloved Sunsoft is as a developer. They developed Punisher's Quest, Batman Returns the Joker, Blaster Master, the list goes on and on. Imagineer, on the other hand, I could barely pick out any good games from their development history, at least in North America. They are a company based out of Tokyo, Japan. Their track record includes such games such as the SNES Space Ace game, Quest 64, the 2 Fighters Destiny for the N64, Mr. Do for the SNES and Game Boy, and the Medabots RPGs, well, the 2 split-off games for Medabots for the GBA. This was their 3rd game in the Quest series of games, with the only other game being Quest Fantasy Challenge, released the year before. The plot is no different from Quest 64. You play as an apprentice magician named Brian. He originally goes out to find his father, who has left the monastery, the mages. You then learn that his father is looking for a thief who has stolen the Tale book. Now you must collect all the elemental amulets, which are being held by powerful baddies, and are crucial in saving the world. I've heard that it's a simplified version of 64 version, but I think they tried to give the plot more purpose with additional scenes in the game, whereas, you know, the plot was just bare bones at best on the N64. The graphics aren't winning awards anytime soon. Even for 1999, this is still an average looking game for Game Boy Color. It has very similar graphics to engine games like Dragon Warrior Monsters. The big difference is that the combat is now more of a grid-based than in a more of a first-person or a third-person view. Monsters feel like 8-bit interpretation of monsters from the N64 game. The problem is that most look like giant blobs of pixels. Add on the fact that without a reference, you have no idea what they are. This makes the game look somewhat half-assed, and really does not stand up to the competition such as Pokemon and the aforementioned Dragon Quest Monsters. The graphics aren't winning awards anytime soon. Even for 1999, this is still an average looking game for the Game Boy Color. It has very similar graphics to engine games like Dragon Warrior Monsters. The big difference is that the combat is now more of a grid-based than in a more of a first-person or a third-person view. Monsters feel like 8-bit interpretation of monsters from the N64 game. The problem is that most look like giant blobs of pixels. Add on the fact that without a reference, you have no idea what they are. This makes the game look somewhat half-assed, and really does not stand up to the competition such as Pokemon and the aforementioned Dragon Quest Monsters. The play is okay at best. The game is a hybrid between a JRPG with a grid-based system like this Gaia. The biggest difference is that random encounters are now shorter, make making these fights a little less of a chore than normal. You can't unlock more characters, so to counterbalance it, they have only one enemy at a time get a move, then you get one. Levels work completely different than in a game like Final Fantasy. Instead of getting level ups, your stats such as MP speed and element strength level up over time through usage. Like for instance, if you want to level up your speed, you would run around a lot. To level up your HP stat, you would take a lot of hits. To level up your MP stat, you would use a lot of magic spells. You have 4 different elements you can level up with a maximum level of 50, like in the N64 game. Levels can also be earned through picking up different hidden items, such as elemental gems. The elemental spells can be combined to create other spells, which is a nice touch that makes it a little bit different than the average JRPG out on the system at this time. Now, while I do like that the combat system is somewhat unique, level ups feel easier to earn, and with the Game Boy Color notation, it seems easier to find your way around. What they didn't change is the lack of direction. I feel the game gives you barely any direction at all. Now, if the game wasn't so linear, I have a big issue with the game. Since it is so linear, I'll give it somewhat a pass. Another problem is that there's still no reason for the plot to exist, or the main character to exist. You really have no effect on any character or have any feeling of being anything more than an errand boy. Your character seems like he was plopped into inconveniently to save the world and nothing else. He doesn't talk or show any kind of emotion, making the plot virtually soulless. Another problem is that there's still no reason for the plot to exist, or the main character to exist. You really have no effect on any character or have any feeling of being anything more than an errand boy. Your character seems like he was plopped into inconveniently to save the world and nothing else. He doesn't talk or show any kind of emotion, making the plot virtually soulless. I will say this, there is fun to be had, the controls work okay, and the combat is somewhat innovative. The problem is, the game is so tedious, unfulfilling, and boring that it ends up being another bad RPG to add to the collection. Overall, Quest Brian's Journey is a boring, tedious, and unfulfilling game. Everything just seems half-assed and has no soul. There are some cool elements and moments in the game, but there are few and far between for me to recommend. Quest Brian's Journey gets a 3.5 out of 10. This is a bad game that should be avoided, unless you want a handheld version of Quest 64, which, by God, I don't know how you would want something like that, but go ahead and be my guest, I'm picking that bad boy up.